This computer. I'm going to do this. Hi, everybody. Bob Schwartz here. Did you know the number one thing you can do to protect your practice can cost you less than $1 a day? And that it saved one practitioner from having to pay more than $67,000 out of her own pocket? We're talking today with the head of Energy Medicine Professional Association, Catherine Krupka, to discover the top things you need to know to keep you and your clients safe and to protect everything you've invested in building your practice. Hi, Catherine. How are you doing?
Hey, Bob, it is so great to see you. I'm well. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks.
So perhaps you can tell everybody, why would energy psychology or energy healing practitioners even need insurance? And, because since it's such really low risk work.
Yeah. This is a top question that we get, and the first thing I would say is that while it is low risk, it is definitely not no risk. The unexpected happens with surprising regularity, and we never know exactly how a client might react to a session, to something we might use. We are in a very litigious society these days, and the unexpected just happens. I personally want to know that I'm not going to have to find $67,000 to cover a claim, that I'm not in danger of losing my practice, and that I can cover the needs of a client should something happen to them during our care. What's interesting is that the coverage, pretty total coverage for an energy practitioner, energy psychology, or general energy healing, would average about $300 a year. And while I know that's money, it's not a lot given what the coverage is that we have and the peace of mind that it brings.
Yeah.
It's also really good for our credibility and for our reputation for ourselves and really for our industry.
And it lowers your anxiety level.
Tremendous. I don't have to tap for that anymore.
Right. Right. Um, so it's interesting because as part of this course, we're trying to help people be more professional. And um, so for if you're, I'm going to get to the psychology part for in a minute, but if you're an energy healing practitioner, where are you going to go to get malpractice? This is malpractice insurance for the most part. Where can you get that? You need to have
Well,
it if you're serious.
exactly. It's a difficult thing to find, and particularly difficult because there are some people now that energy medicine is growing a bit who are sort of throwing it into a regular business policy or throwing it into some kind of unrelated thing. But what happens then is it's not really the energy coverage that's needed, and you're working with an organization that doesn't understand what you do. I'm going to give a quick story. We had a claim against a practitioner who received notice from the Texas Medical Board and needed she was subpoenaed, right, and had to deliver all this information. And the claim was not from the client, but from a client's family member, right? So first of all, totally unexpected, nothing she could have done about it. And here's this thing. So, because the company, the insurance company, is super good and has a specific policy for energy medicine, which is the one that we use, and was through an organization that understands and basically is made up of energy healers, the the company actually went above and beyond what they were required to do. The process was at a stage where they didn't actually have to do anything yet. But they jumped in, hired an attorney for her. They were able to respond to the request from the state, take care of everything, save her, reputation, her ability to continue to practice and do her work. And because she was with a company that also got her and got what she was doing, we were able to be a good interface for her. So you want to be sure that you're getting something specific to the needs of your practice, which if I go to a massage company, for instance, or something, I'm not getting that. And you want to know that the people you're working with know your work and what you're doing and can really advocate for you.
Well, that segues into the second thing I was going to ask. So there are people who might be a licensed mental health practitioner and they'll have insurance for that, but not necessarily for energy psychology or
So
healing. And doesn't it, do you anything to say about that?
Yeah, this is one of the very common mistakes we see is that someone who carries insurance for the licensed work that they do, right? In psychology, for instance, or acupuncture, will see that type of situation also, where they have a policy that covers their licensed work, but it doesn't cover the energy psychology or the Reiki or whatever other talk or energy method they might be doing that isn't covered by the license policy. So they're going about their business thinking that they're covered, and in fact, they aren't. So they'll want to get a secondary policy, which this is a perfect situation for a very energy specific policy to cover that part of their work. So you've got the licensed practitioners who need a secondary policy, and we also have a lot of non-licensed practitioners doing various forms of energy healing, energy psychology, sound healing, coaching of all varieties that don't have any real legal protections because they aren't licensed
Mhm.
and need a policy specific to their work to be able to cover them. And also, then really the reputation and the credibility becomes a more important element of it, too. I want to be able to signal to my clients, particularly as a non licensed professional, that I am a professional, that we're doing serious work, and that I can take care of them should something happen.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. I've been talking about it. I was talking about on the webinar I just did recently about converting information to energy, but just having a mindset. Like I remember reading about in the Lord of the Rings when they made these movies, like the town of they did all this stuff that the camera never saw ever, just to get like in the, you know, to totally be it, right? And so it's like if you want to be a professional, you gotta act like you need this. It's part of the whole energy of the damn thing. And yeah, I see your point.
You're absolutely right about that. You know, I think it's something we really need to embody. And
We're
really,
energy
I mean,
people.
from a psychology perspective, if I feel more professional, I exude that,
Yeah,
right? My clients or
yeah,
potential clients in my marketing work can feel that, pick up on it, and it's an upward perpetuating
right.
cycle.
And you'll never be able to put your finger on it exactly, but so okay, so that's the kind of the positive in that end. But you know, on the bat, sometimes, although I know it's rare, there are claims made. Just so people have a sense, because I don't want people walking around in fear. Because I know what kind of claims are made. You know, what are the
So
neighborhood?
let me say two things here. I want to give you a couple examples of actual claims
Yeah,
because there's nothing like the
yeah,
nitty gritty to really bring it
yeah.
home. But this is an important question, and it's something that people ask, I think, especially now that so many of us are working remotely, right? Is like, "Meh, do I even really need this?" But some of the most common claims that we end up seeing are a failure to, and these aren't in any particular order, are a failure to refer out to a medical professional or the perception of that, right?
Oh,
Issues with state regulatory boards for a perception or an allegation of practicing without a license.
mm,
We see this with issues with informed consent and forms that are used or not used. And we see it with crossing boundaries, so touch, confidentiality, or privacy, which is actually becoming a bigger thing now that things go out on social. Somebody says something, somebody overhears. These things happen all the time. We also see slip and fall, which is part of what people are starting to blow off because we're all working on Zoom. But I really, really urge people not to do this. For one, we want to keep our options open, right? Lots more people are doing in person things again, group trainings, group sessions, one on ones. Again, we want to keep our options open as practitioners. But also, one of the things that's important to know is that for a slip and fall, for instance, which is the most common thing under a general liability, over which you might have no control, as you'll see in one of my case studies, the average legal fee for that you would have to pay is $28,000, not even including the medical is on top of that. And if it goes to trial, you're looking at more than $100,000. And when you go into the malpractice part of things, right, the practicing without a license, all that type of stuff, it goes into the millions. I don't want to even think about that possibility, right? For a few $100s, I can completely take care of that. Um, so naturally, we encourage that. We encourage that. Some of the things that we see that are really that have been interesting cases. I'll actually start with the slip and fall case because it's a great situation where the practitioner had no control over what occurred, and it was so complicated that there's no way, even the money aside, right? Even if there had been no award, there's just no way a practitioner could navigate that whole process on their own. So this was a situation, there was a training that was taking place, and an attendee left and went down this outdoor stairwell that was icy and slipped and fell. So they filed a claim against the owner of the property, the leader of the workshop, and our policyholder. So there were 3 defendants, which gets it super complicated, right? So amazingly, the award was to the plaintiff. The award was split up 3 ways, so each of the defendants ended up paying part of the legal fees and part of the injury award. And because of the complexity of the 3 defendants, the legal part of it was more than twice the actual claim amount, right? So it was a crazy amount of money, but the insurance company took care of everything and paid in full the $26,000 that went against our policyholder, not by any fault of her own.
Well, let me make sure I get this straight. I don't know. I mean, I teach Reiki or what? I teach Reiki. I go to I have a thing at, I don't know, a yoga center. It's not my. I go to their building, and somebody slips and falls outside of the yoga center. They sue me along with the yoga center. I can see suing the yoga center, but what did I do? I just
You could be, if
that's
you
what
were
happened.
part of that in any way,
Yeah,
you could also
just
then be
just
named,
sue
right?
everybody.
So you
Yeah, wow.
just don't know. So the
Yeah,
amount,
$300.
the
Yeah, I don't have to
kind
worry
of
about that.
randomness, right? 300
Yeah,
bucks.
right.
So well worth doing.
And I was unaware. Actually, this is news to me. I was unaware that your policy covered things like slip and fall. That's news.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll talk in a little bit about some of the specifics, but we cover the professional liability and the general liability and even more.
And even more. Well, okay.
And more.
Did you have another
Well, so
story?
there's an interesting one here, although, well, this is a good an example of um, a situation where the practitioner was technically at fault and still covered. So this was a product allergy situation, right? So a client was applying something to, or the practitioner was applying something to their client. Not knowing that they had an allergy, they put something that had almond oil, right, on. They had a reaction, went to the emergency room, got the care that they needed, and the policy found no fault because the practitioner didn't know and did all the right paperwork, had everything in order, had handled everything appropriately. And so it was all covered, absolutely no problem. The important thing, the reason why I picked this one as an example, is that our practitioner, our client, right, our policyholder, was able to instantly do the thing that needed to be done for their client, right? Call the ambulance, get them to the emergency room, not worrying about what do I do? How will this get paid for? What's going to happen to me or to the client? The client also knew, because their practitioner had insurance, that they, although they're in a difficult situation, were made whole physically and financially with no worries. So this is a great situation of, had I not had that policy, my client might not have just needed the emergency room fees, but they could have been very upset that I didn't have the things in place to take care of them, and it could have actually gotten much worse. There's one other example I'd like to give, if you don't mind, which actually is an unusual case, but an extraordinary example of how having insurance can save the day. Let me just put it that way. This was a copyright and breach of contract situation for our policyholder, and a claim was made against them for copyright infringement, breach of contract, for teaching a modality or a modification of a modality and using materials in a way that wasn't actually permitted. The insurance company quickly got an attorney, set everything up for this person, and did all the due diligence, everything that needed to be done. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough information to fully support the client, and the judgment went against the policyholder.
Mhm.
But the insurance company covered all of the fees, the entire claim of this, and this is the one that was more than $67,000.
So even though,
That claim, and they were able to go back and begin a business again.
so just so I understand, make sure. So they, I guess they lost. So they did something wrong, uh, according to the court, and the insurance company, even though they did something wrong, still paid the claim.
Yes.
Right. So it's you can even make a you can make a mistake. You can do
You can
something
make a
wrong,
mistake.
and you're covered. Like,
Exactly.
say somebody, again with that other one with the, if you have with the almond oil, maybe they didn't ask about allergies, and the person, if okay, would, I guess, be technically a mistake, um, but they'd be covered.
They can be covered, right? Obviously, you want to be sure that you've done the due diligence. Insurance is the foundation of a
Right.
safe practice, and there are other things too. Obviously, your informed consent, your
Sure.
forms, the all those things.
Yeah.
But yes, so even when you make a mistake, you can be covered, which is so important because intentionally, right? These are all accidents, or these are all things that are out of a practitioner's control.
Just say that again because we had a little it got wonky. Just say it again.
Yeah, sure. What's amazing is, what's important is these are all things that either are a mistake, completely not intended by the client, or that were completely out of their control.
So I guess so there are different policies, different kinds of policy, which I, again, I didn't have that differentiated in my brain. So enlighten me and the rest of the people.
Well, I'll tell you, actually, I didn't know much of this until I took this position at EMPA and realized actually that I'd been underinsured for years in my own practice. This is a really complicated realm, in part because no two policies are exactly alike.
Right.
Everything is a little different one way or another, and you could really just go crazy digging through the details of every little nook and cranny of all of this. But let me lay out generally the things that, as an energy practitioner or energy psychology practitioner, you want to be sure that you have covered. I'm actually going to bring this up on the screen, if that's okay, so people can see
Mhm.
what we're talking about. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the first is the malpractice or professional liability. This is probably the most important, and this deals with things like what we were talking about, um, uh, allegations of practicing without a license, if your forms aren't correct, if someone believes that you have not done your work properly or harmed them in some way during your work, this is the coverage that takes care of that. General liability is that slip and fall that we were talking about. Personal and advertising covers things like slander, libel, if people think that you are misrepresenting what you do or overstating the results of the work that you perform, which is very easy to do, right? Because it doesn't even necessarily have to be true. If someone finds that to be the case, right, they believe that's the case, then that claim
And
can be filed.
that's actually a separate insurance policy that I wasn't aware about.
It's a separate piece, right? So you'll get a policy, but these are types of insurance that will be included
I
in
see.
a policy.
Got
So
it.
when you look for a policy for your energy practice, you want it to include at least these 5 types of insurance.
Got it.
Product liability is like the almond oil situation that we saw. Property damage or renter's damage is pretty self-explanatory. So you want to be sure that you have at least these 5 types of insurance.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And so just, I mean, I'll just state the obvious. I'm right. HTPA's policy has all five
We actually do. We have all five types of policy, all five types of insurance in our policy.
policy.
Another really important
That's
piece
cost about $300.
that costs about $300 a year for the average practitioner. There's one that's a little bit less for sort of students or people who just
Right.
work part time, and one that's just a bit higher for people who do training or who have large group events or things like that.
That's a steal.
It's a honestly, I
That's
probably
just,
shouldn't
I'm
say this,
sorry.
but for me, it's just a complete no-brainer, right?
Yep.
And uh, I sleep better, right? I get $300 more worth of sleep per year just knowing that these things won't happen to me in my
Less than a
practice.
buck a day to sleep better. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So another really important thing when you're looking for a policy, you're going to want to consider price, obviously, which we just spoke about, the coverage and the
Wow.
limits, which is what this slide is showing us about here. And you'll also want to look at benefits, which I'll talk about in just a second. This is fairly self-explanatory. This is a description of the type of coverage, the things we were just talking about, what it really entails, right? What are the types of things that this might cover you from? And over here, the coverage limits are super important to be aware of. The average policy covering holistic practitioners ranges between 1 million and 3 million per occurrence or per aggregate. Occurrence is a single time event, a single time claim, and an aggregate would be the number of incidents or claims during the course of a 12-month period. So these are 1 million to 3 million. I know this is crazy, right? $300. Uh,
Well, I'm just going $4 million for you better not be having that many issues on a year. Something's
one would
wrong with
hope,
you
right?
if
One
that's
would
happening
hope.
a bunch. But anyway, I'm sorry.
You might
Continue.
have other things to look at that actually.
You've got some issues.
Our policy does cover more than the average, right? You'll see that
Yeah.
our aggregate is up to 4 million and that our per occurrence is up to 2. So this is higher than most. Hopefully you would never ever even approach
Yeah.
anything in the scope of these numbers. But if you did, it's good to know. If you've got a $3 million limit and the claim is 4 million, you're out of luck on that other million. So the higher level of coverage just keeps you better protected, keeps you safer. So these are the things you want to be looking at, right? The things you want to compare when you're looking at policies. The last thing, and this is a thing that totally blew my mind when I
Yeah.
learned it, which was only after I joined EMPA, unfortunately, and that we see actually catches people by surprise in a really
Occurrence of claims made.
heartbreaking
Yes.
way,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
is claims made policy versus an occurrence policy. This is the all important question of when are you covered?
Yeah.
With a claims made policy, I am covered during the time that that policy is in force, not a minute afterwards. And even if I was covered at the time of an event that precipitated the claim, once that policy has ended, I'm not covered in that back period.
Right.
So let's say I retire in January of 2023, and in March, someone files a claim for work I did in 2022 when I had coverage. No bets, right? I'm off.
Claims
I'm out.
made. You're screwed.
Yeah, I'm screwed, right? I only have coverage when I'm covered. So
Right.
even if something happened before when I
Right.
had it, no go. With an occurrence policy, most policies, by the way, are claims made because it's less expensive for the company. An occurrence policy means that I am covered no matter what for the period of time for any event that happens while I had coverage. So in the same situation, I retire in January 2023. My policy ended, let's say December 31st, 2022. Let's say 5 years from then, 2026, someone files a claim from my work in 2022. No problem. I'm good. I'm covered.
Yeah.
We obviously have an occurrence policy. We think it's really, really important for energy professionals because you don't know, again, When is someone going to do something? When might something happen? So the distinction between a claims made and occurrence policy can be huge. And whatever you choose, right? You might decide that a claims made policy is right for you. You want to know what you're doing before you purchase a policy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never right. Claims mate's never right. Bad idea. If you're doing insurance, it's like, I don't know what the I mean, I remember dealing with this for other insurance, but this just FYI, folks, never ever get a claims made policy because you're not safe. It defeats the purpose because the insurance, the claims generally happen down the road a piece. So you're
Exactly.
asking for trouble. You're peeing your money away.
And I would always personally, I would just always be on pins and needles, then wondering, is
Well, and
something going to happen? Is something going to happen?
what are you going to save? $25, $50? I mean, it's just a bad deal. It's just a bad, like, don't do it. Bad idea. I can't think of the right metaphor for it, but there ought to be. I'm sure there is one. I just not. Yeah. Oh, you guys do occurrence, and that's my policies are occurrence. My standard life is occurrence. Now, yeah, that's actually, and make sure if you're a mental health professional and you have liability under that, make sure it's occurrence because if you have claims made, you're massively at risk.
Well, and mental
Now you're
health,
kind of now
sure,
you
there's
can
going to be
change.
down the road.
Yeah, actually, now you're really in trouble because if you ever change the policy, you've lost. Oh, no, that's not true. You know what? Because you can buy a tail.
You
You
can
can.
get a tail,
You can
but
get a
they're
tail.
for very specific periods of time,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's an additional amount of
yeah.
money.
Well,
It's a
right.
whole other thing
That's
you're
a whole other
still
thing. But
continuing to
okay.
cover.
Yeah, I don't want to get another thing. But sorry.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, all right. Well, that's awesome. Pretty good.
Yeah.
I know we're making this video. I'm sure I will make sure in this course that there is a link. So if you want insurance policy, you can get one through HPA. No, that's not right.
EMPA, we're the Energy Medicine Professional
EMPA. Sorry,
Association.
yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
That's
uh,
great.
and uh, and yeah, I mean, you guys have been great to work with, and it's very knowledgeable. This is super important. And again, it's just part of sleeping better. And again, if the goal is to have a full practice, so the good news of having a really full practice is you have a really full practice. The bad news is you technically have increased risk because there are more people running through your doors. So you definitely want to take care of it. And this is a teeny tiny fraction cost. I mean, it's the cheapest thing you're going to get in your entire business. And
Actually, that's
and
probably
God
true.
forbid anything
I think
goes
I pay almost
wrong.
that much for my Zoom subscription. Yes. I will just would reiterate the importance of this. Obviously, the protection part is crystal clear.
Yeah.
But also from the professionalism, right? And what we can say to our clients, how we even feel interacting with them, and what we're doing for our industry. Bob, I know you talk a lot about and have been very involved in the advancement of energy psychology over these years and getting it more accepted in the mainstream. And one of the ways that we do that is continuing to signal we are professionals.
Yeah.
And this is just one small piece of that.
Yeah.
One other thing I would like to say is while we, of course, believe our policy is fabulous and we would love everybody to sign with us, we really want you to have the policy, each practitioner to have the policy that is right for you. And if we can even just be helpful as someone is comparing policies or thinking through the situations or what's available, we're happy to do that. We are almost all energy practitioners in our company, which is amazing. We feel for our fellow energy practitioners and we want to help.
There you have it. Well, thank you, Catherine.
It's
Have
an absolute pleasure, Bob.
all right. See you all later, folks.
Take care.